Welcome to our Watch Brothers podcast. This week we have none other than Chris Alexander, better known as the Dial Artist. Chris, good morning, and how are you, mate?
Yeah, morning. I'm good. All's well, and glad to be here.
Excellent. Before we get too far down the rabbit hole, perhaps you wouldn't mind explaining to those who don't know who you are, who the Dial Artist is and what your background is.
Sure. So, I am an artist that specializes in watch styles, also leather goods as well. Kind of been doing this for 7 years. My background is in art and design, so for almost 2 decades, I was teaching in an art college. People building their art skills, and I suppose any creative individual wants to always express themselves, and I slowly.
Is that like as a tutor?
Yes. I was a lecturer, and then went on to become the head of department for the art school. And then I suppose with any person that likes to dabble in what they specialize in, I kind of meandered through many things from product design to model making, all these kind of things, and then always had a love and affinity with watches, and painted a Seiko many years ago, shoved that on a Reddit forum, and here I am today,
It's amazing how, something you feel, I'll do this for myself. Yeah. And all of a sudden you go, oh, I've just done this. And then, all of a sudden you go, can you do me one? Can you do me one?
Yeah.
And then you're inundated with it.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
Kind of going back 7 years, it was at the infancy of where, Seiko modding was. So it was it's a dark art back then.
Yeah.
There was only a handful of people that were modding Seikos, and it was a very specialized thing because opening up a automatic watch of any watch was kind of seen as a no-go zone.
Yeah.
And I clearly remember, like, all the Seiko mod parts were, you had to email this random email address. Can't remember the guy's name, but it was in China. It's this random email address, and he'll email back with a PayPal link, and you paid him, whatever it was for a sapphire crystal or a bezel.
Yeah.
Then you hear nothing back, and then this ominous brown envelope just pops through your letterbox in a couple of weeks' time, filled with watch parts. And now you have, huge websites like the Moki Kids and.
But it's amazing how it's changed from like the early days where, as you say, it was just, a guy has got some spare stuff in a at home somewhere to now it's a full-time business for a lot of companies.
Sure. Yeah, no, and it's incredible what they're doing. They've gone from the basic. I say basics. It's quite complicated, but in the relatively sense, the basics of sapphire crystals and replacement bezel inserts, and to now unique hands and even cases. I mean,
hands
you can
and
get
dials
Seiko
and all
cases.
Sorts,
yeah. You get kits for your Seiko to make it look like a Cartier Santos or a Patek.
Oh, wow.
It's huge now. It's huge. It's incredible what they can do, and it's an art form in itself. I mean, some of the things that people do is incredible. But it's amazing how rapid that whole world has kind of evolved in such a short space of time.
I'm assuming you're no longer dabbling that part of it now.
If I'll be honest, I don't, and it's not because I don't want to. It's because there are so many people who do such an amazing job at it.
Yeah.
And how they can price them at what they do is I can't. I personally couldn't compete with that. So why fight against the community and rather support the community? So there's many people that I do say, why don't you try this person who can do this? And I can do the dial, we can send it to that person. I think that's where sharing the skill set is important.
It's working to your strengths as well, isn't it, I guess?
Absolutely. And I think that's, that whole Seiko modding community, I think, has generated such a huge influx of micro brands. It has to have influenced them because, when you think about the availability of these parts through, Alibaba or whatever sourcing stream people go to.
Mm.
Um, that allows people who want to build a brand to do so quite successfully.
Yeah.
If they obviously have the initial, cash flow to do that. And I think that's then semi-evolved, and I was going down a track here, but it's semi-evolved into how the Swiss watch world is able to support micro brands as well. Because there's obviously lots of, like Boken and all these other kind of brands who
Yeah.
do have a lot of parts made in Switzerland. They're able to do so at low MOQs.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's do the most important part, watch check. Have you
Yeah.
got what are you wearing one today?
I am wearing a unmodded 126655 if my screen will allow it. There we go. So it's
There we go,
a
just about.
Everose Yachtmaster.
Very nice indeed. Very nice. Well, I
Yes.
thought I'd do the honours. I don't know if you can see my. Do you recognise that?
Yes, the famous viral
It's
Tudor FXD.
well, yes. We'll come to that bit later on. But yeah, it's we'll get into that a bit later on. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun with that, working with you with that. Obviously, you're excuse me. You're based in, is it Perth in Scotland?
Yes, so just outside Perth in Scotland.
Obviously, you're not working with IFL any longer. So are you just currently working solo?
Yeah, so I obviously started out independent. I then supported IFL for a period of time and then left them, must have been about a year and a half ago now. Yeah, something like that.
Good, good. And obviously, you've worked with tons of brands, loads of different models. Obviously, you're well known for the Casio, the Tissot PRX, or dial work, and more recently with the Apia.
Yeah.
How do these kind of collaborations come about? Do you contact brands, or do they kind of come up to Scotland banging on your door?
It's kind of a mixture of both, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in the early days, when you're starting out, there was a lot of contacting brands and say, "Hey, I love what you do. I have this idea," and there's a lot of interest, but not a lot of uptake because it's. I mean, for me, it was a relatively unknown thing to do initially. People weren't too sure who I was, what I was doing, what the capabilities were. Whereas now I'm in a fortunate position where I have I suppose it's consistency more than anything else. I
Yeah.
think that it's a kind of a double-edged sword of a having a love for what you do in terms of having a love for watches and the world of horology,
Yeah.
and then bringing something to that, not to disrupt, but well, it is to disrupt, but to also bring something new and different. And I think that I've kind of tried my best over a long period of time to not come in and, upset the apple cart and leave very quickly. I've kind of tried to come in and do my own thing whilst not trying to tread on other people's toes, and not trying to, shoulder charge my way into a part of the industry that has been, that is quite strong and so forth. So I think over that period of time, fingers crossed, I hope, I've kind of built up a relatively strong and, good reputation. And that has since allowed me to work with brands like Lepe, which is an incredibly well established brand,
Absolutely.
and it has a clientele and respect in the community that is incredible. To then also working with extremely popular fun brands like Spinnaker, new brands like Apia. So, for example, at the API, I got in touch with those guys. I saw what they were doing, and I thought it was incredible what they were doing. And I thought it'd be fun to do something. And then you look at things like Spinnaker, who got in touch with myself. So it is a mixture.
I suppose it's the kind of the people working within the brands want to try something new, and just by get a fresh angle, they can contact, there's loads of people obviously like yourself now kind of making roads in the industry. And obviously you've all got a different take on it, whether it's, different hands or, whatever it might be. It's quite interesting to see all these kind of different people doing very, very different work, and adding different depth to the watches.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and excuse me. I think the important thing to do is to, I've spoken to some people before and so forth, and I've not been able to, from my perspective, offer them anything that I can support them with their watch brand. So it's always important to come with a concept that, will elevate the brand, rather than just doing something for the sake of doing it,
Absolutely,
So,
yeah.
for the stuff like Spinnaker, it was very purposeful what we did because of their affinity with, the ocean and, wayfinding and all this kind of stuff. And even stuff with the Lepe was very purposeful. So that's what I like doing rather than just doing something because it's an opportunity to make a quick buck, because that doesn't really serve you any good in the long run, I feel.
No, of course it doesn't. It doesn't. What's your, have you got any formal training? Obviously you taught, art at college or university, but what kind of art did you train as when you first started?
So I kind of trained as what they call a model maker. So that's people who produce physical 3D models for architects.
That's what I did. I did an apprenticeship in it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. So, so as you know yourself, it's all about visualizing reality to scale, really.
Yeah.
So I did that. I moved more into the film product side. So doing things for there was a company I worked for down in Bristol called Amalgam Model Makers, who produce very hyper
just like for
scale
prop
models
work and that kind of stuff.
So that was for Formula One. So if you Google Amalgam Model Makers, you'll see they make, era accurate scale models of sports cars. And so I did that, and then got a call back up from my old lecturers to see if I was keen to come back up to Scotland, because they were down in Bristol to lecture. And I jumped to the chance because it was something different, something fun. And if anybody knows the model making world, it's a hard slog. So teaching was like, well, this is easy, and it turned out to be a harder slog.
Yeah,
the grass may not always be greener, but I loved it. I loved teaching.
Well, I guess it brought you back up further back home towards home, I guess, did it?
Yeah. So, I grew up in South Africa, and I moved back to Scotland when I was about 16, to Glasgow, and then trained in Glasgow, then moved down to Bristol, then came back to Glasgow to teach. And then later on, I did some more formal training in terms of did my master's up in Aberdeen, up at Grey School of Art. So, I kind of, I try to, I practice what I preach in the sense of, I've tried to always develop and push myself in a sense, as a creative and as, a knowledge-based stuff. And I think that's kind of, when we look at what I've done with the watch stuff, it was very much a case of I had no idea what I'm doing with the watch world.
Yeah.
When I first started out, I had no idea.
But you have to find out what works for you.
Yeah, I guess, absolutely. And it was, and my dad had a big affinity with watches. He loved them. So he had boxes and boxes of watch parts and so forth. So there was always this kind of semi interest in kind of mechanical movements. But, if you go back 7 years ago, you wouldn't find a single YouTube channel that showed you how to open a watch, never mind talk about watches, So it's a very much it was a unknown. And kind of going back 7 years, you kind of wish that you bought into Bitcoin and bought into Rolex,
Absolutely. So hindsight's a wonderful thing. Yeah,
absolutely. So,
who's your who inspires you these days? Is it what artists, or is it you get inspired by kind of everyday things?
Sorry, I'm plugging my computer in. Very
no, you're right.
I'm inspired by the world of street. So, like, if I had to think about traditional artists that I really love, there's a gentleman called Tristan Eaton who if anybody knows Kid Robots or any of these kind of designer vinyl toys, he is the one who designed the Dunny and the Money for Kid Robot, and he is extremely well known in the urban arts world. He's an incredible artist. How he does what he does is incredible. So I think he's really been an inspiration in terms of how to communicate art in a very abstract, different way. And then so I've always kind of loved the expressive abstract art form. So people, easy comparisons to people like Jackson Pollock and all these things, which I love. I have no issue with that. Although I try to kind of make sure that I do my own little thing. And I suppose my art form, it wasn't a purposeful thing. I didn't deliberately try and say, well, this is how I like to paint or do things. I just had a concept in my head in terms of I just love to see some bright colors and something different on a watch. And using the techniques I've learned over the years through model making and various things, I kind of, but pen to paper practice. I mean, I think I've spent, 4 or 5 figures over the years experimenting with paints, experimenting with techniques. It's not, I mean, it looks relative. I suppose, people might think it looks easy. And I think that's only because it's been,
but it's not easy when you first start. It's easy when you've got years down under your belt and you know where the pitfalls are. Because your last thing you want to do, your canvas now, obviously when you first start, is now down to a tiny little watch dial. You've got a much smaller area, and any errors are going to probably be magnified because you've not got that space to kind of hide things.
Exactly. And you don't have room for error. You don't, I mean, especially, going back years, for the last 7 years, some watch styles are relatively straightforward to get and replace, but 9 times out of 10, you can't. If you make a mistake, that's it. You've got an option of, buying a whole new watch and just swapping the dial out. Or seeing if you can find one on Chrono24 or eBay, which is, it's a hit and miss. So the room for error is 0. I suppose, I've heard many stories before of, there's this, story of this guy discussing his, creative, talking about his relationship with Nike and, saying that, I can do this job, and it costs $30,000 and he does it in a couple of days. And he said, well, that seemed a lot of money. He said, no, you're paying for my expertise and being able to do it quickly, and it's that, I think it's that funny triangle of, I'm not too sure if you heard the expression, like, you can have 2 of these triangles. You can have it cheap, but, and you can have it quick, but the quality goes, and you can't have all 3.
And also, I think people tend to kind of forget when someone's charging for a product or a service, they're not necessarily charging for that hour or that day's work. You've also got to factor in, whether you've got a vehicle, running costs, and also all that knowledge. You've spent years honing those skills, so you can't just pick those up, watch a YouTube video, and hope to kind of, get to the same level within minutes. So that obviously comes at a cost.
Yeah, I think that's also what people maybe, their perception of certain art forms as well. They might see some things and kind of go, how is that worth hundreds of millions and so forth? And I mean, there's obviously a value asset proposition to these things. But I mean, if anybody's trying to do what Jackson Pollock has done, they'll very quickly realize that it's not that straightforward. And then there's the whole value added of, the actual, the idea behind it, the concept behind it, and that's interpretive, between the viewer and the artist as well. But hopefully people see what I do. They see that it looks relatively straightforward. And that's the idea. It's not meant to be overcomplicated, but it's meant to be done to the highest level possible. And that's taken, as I say, a long time to figure out. And I do disappoint a lot of people, and I do get quite a lot of negative replies back when people ask me, what paint do I use and how do I do this? And I say, unfortunately, I don't share the information because costs me. It costs me an awful lot of money to figure out that information.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's quite right. I mean, you wouldn't share your inner secrets to someone when you've spent all those years kind of, getting to where you are, just to give those away for nothing. Because that's just kind of pointless. I mean, are you a big watch guy? Do you have a big collection?
Oh, yes. I used to have a big collection. I would say that I used to have a larger collection than what I have now. I've kind of I suppose like any collector, you
Yeah,
grow and you slim down,
up,
depending
down.
on,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, I mean, I've always been big lover of watches, and had everything from, you know, Casios up to what I currently own now, which I'm very, lucky
But
to
do you have a
own. But
daily wear, or do you just rotate, go to the box and say, right, I'm going to stick that on today?
my daily is the Yachtmaster now. I've kind of
Yep.
it's always been one of those dream watches and one of those grails for me, and
Yeah,
now I
yeah.
own it, and I wear. I mean, whether it's right or wrong, I do wear it every day, and I'm not so
Well,
precious
the
about it.
watches are
You
made
know,
to be worn, right? Why would you just
exactly.
stick them in a safe and, get them out on
Yeah,
a good
exactly.
occasion?
Yeah. No, and I do. I mean, the previous one to that was my daily was. I think I've actually, do I have that? Got it here. Was it's a purple dial OP. So
Oh,
that's a
lovely.
39 millimeter. Yeah, so that's a
Yeah.
114,300, or 200, 300, 114,300. So yeah, that was a discontinued one. So and that was my old daily
Yeah.
watch. But I suppose, being in the industry, and when you do speak to people who are, relatively in the industry, for example, I mean, I know like, Roman from Luxury Bazaar, he doesn't really have a collection because he's got watches lying around all the time.
Yeah.
So he just goes
Yeah.
on what's lying about. And that's obviously a lucky position to be in. But there's a lot of people that when they're very high up in the watch industry and you look at what's in their wrist, nine times out of 10, I'm quite surprised as to what they're wearing.
Yeah.
And it's because they've done that whole journey
Been
in a
there,
sense.
done that.
They've gone from, yeah,
Just want a G-Shock or something, Swatch or something.
it's something like that, or it's a watch that they owned or was passed on to them that has more of an
Yeah, is that
intrinsic
sentimental?
value.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I wanted to do I mean, one of the first big watches I remember as a kid was the Seiko Kinetic, which was like the first kind of
Yeah, I had one of those.
yeah. So that was a watch I had when I was a wee kid. My dad bought me that, and I had a friend who unfortunately nicked it off me and tore it apart because he wanted to see how it would work. So it was quite disappointing, but I've managed to kind of source one. So I have that. That's kind of like a sentiment. Never actually worn it, but and I realized that's a lady's watch. There you go. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So, the one that I own, and maybe it was because that was fitted my smaller wrist as a kid, but it turned out that the one that I loved and I owned was built for ladies, but still looks pretty cool, I think.
Happy days.
Yeah.
Obviously, watch art seems to have grown hugely. Not just obviously dial work and hand work and all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff, but there seems to be a steady rise in people painting and drawing watches. Have you obviously you're probably more into that kind of field than a lot of other people. You notice that more with
Hmm.
the rise of
Yeah.
people getting into, they've got this skill of art college and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, if you love a watches, is that such seems to be a rise of people kind of doing some amazing work currently.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there is. There's a lot of people doing some incredible stuff. There's, and you can kind of see the journey that they're going through where they
Yeah,
have tried to experiment with different paints, and you can see definitely some art college, knowledge being applied. Like they're obviously using oils and so forth, and then that not working out because of the texture. And so
yeah,
you can see different people's journeys and different people experimenting. So yeah, it's good. And the thing is, it's important to allow these people to experiment and to find their own feet, because what works for one doesn't necessarily work for another.
yeah.
And when I do speak to people who have, who paint for, huge watch brands like Hermes and Patek, and their skills and their materials and what they do, that's a completely different level
Yeah, yeah,
to
absolutely.
what nine times out, to what myself and many others are able to do because of the infrastructure needed to
Do you paint
accomplish those
yourself,
dials.
as in normal paint canvas work, or is that something you did?
I I have done that before in previous things. I was more physical making stuff rather than
Yeah,
painting canvases. But
yeah.
when I do paint a canvas, I now find it too big. I find it too overwhelming.
You want a
It's
huge
one of these things
brush?
like, yeah, give me a big brush and then that's fine. But no, it's sometimes I kind of thinking I like the challenge of compacting everything into a tiny space rather
well,
than
you've got those restrictions and constraints. You've literally got to work within this tiny, what, 30 mil dial, something like that.
Something. I think most of them are about just below 30 millimeters.
Wow,
Most dials, most dials. I mean, you think about most Seiko dials are 28.5 millimeters. Most Rolex dials are roughly about the same size, and it's quite deceptive. There's a lot of watches that actually share the same dial size, but the cases are bigger and smaller. You know, so I think like if you think about, I think a Rolex Oyster Perpetual 36 millimeter has the same dial size as the 40 millimeters of Mariner. You know, so you don't
it's that perception of size, doesn't it? You think it's a bigger, but actually same size. Yeah,
exactly.
I guess my first encounter with kind of watch customization was kind of in the early days. Was, I guess, was through like Bamford watches, and then more recently, kind of through Secon, who kind of does his own work. I mean, of that kind of work again, there seems to be brands popping up just doing that kind of custom work nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Romaric is like flying these days. I mean, 2024 is super strong. It's super strong year for him. I mean, I know that he initially started out kind of the same way that I did. It was all rogue, you know, it was like, you know, changing second hands on old date just and fun things like that.
That's where I really fell for him. That I personally love that, the fact that you can just change those hands with some kind of comical thing on it. I'd love to get hold of a set of hands. One day I will get a set of hands for something for one of my pieces. But yeah, I just love what he's doing with his work.
Yeah. And he has his own artistic style, which I truly love, which is obviously a satirical kind of play in words. And I think that's super strong because he's able to, you know, it's a signature. It's a kind of an IP in a sense. And I think that he's done such a great job. And I've spoken to him many times, and he's a good friend. But he's very honest as well, which I love. That he too is in this position where if he doesn't feel he can do something for the brand, he can't offer anything.
Yeah,
you know, he won't kind of. And you can see that in his work, that everything he's done in his work is purposeful for that brand. There's always you
need that honesty, as you say. It's not just a cash cow just because you're doing work for them. Unless you're adding an extra something to it, you're kind of cheapening yourself, I guess.
You've got to add value, and I think that's what I try and do for individuals when they want commission work, which is a very interesting perspective in a sense that you are adding a huge amount of value. It's not necessarily monetary value, but you're adding a huge amount of value to someone's watch, and that can't be quantified for other people. Other people see it as devaluing the watch, which is really interesting. And you've experienced this yourself with, you know, posting, you know, the FXD on, how people are very opinionated about what you do to your own personal items, which I always find extremely interesting.
Yeah. Oh, you know, what have you done? You've ruined it. And you just think, hang on.
I know.
I can paint my house what colour I want. It's still a house.
Exactly.
It's not going to take away from it.
It's incredible how people feel so strongly about other people's possessions.
Yeah.
That always really interests me. And then, like, even there was one comment and someone says, well, if you post it online, you know, we're free to comment on it. And it's like, I totally understand that, but it's also a case of, why though? Why? You know, that's like, it's a simple question of, but why?
But
why
I guess that's part
unkind
of, that's social media to a point, isn't it? You know, we do these things, we take photos, and we're very proud of something we've seen or, you know, something we just had done, and we put it up there. And, you know, case in point, you know, yes, we put that picture up of the watch that you did for me, and 98% of the comments were, wow, amazing, you know, all this kind of stuff. But yeah, of course you get that negativity from some people, but which is equally fair, because that's just their view on what I've had done. They wouldn't choose to do it, but it just takes so much effort for people to be negative. which I feel.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I get art, and you'll probably know this yourself from art. Well, art is meant to be, it's meant to evoke an emotional response.
Yeah, of
That could
course.
be negative, and that could
Yeah,
be positive. That could
yeah,
be undecided, whatever it might be. And I suppose I, as an artist, have completely succeeded
yeah,
in both camps because I have evoked an emotion from somebody.
yeah,
What I find really interesting is, this person has scrolled, stopped, looked, got angry, got
yeah, yeah,
frustrated, and then taken the time to reply to something and
yeah.
then continue to reply to something. It's like you're taking so much effort out your day to pass on such a negative, judgmental comment on
Whereas
something
if you're in a
that you do
gallery, you
not
just walk
own.
on. If you're in a gallery,
Yeah.
you just walk on to the next picture, wouldn't you?
But it's the same thing. It's like
Yeah,
if he bumped into you into the street, do you think he would verbalize it to your
you
face?
wouldn't.
No,
Yeah,
exactly. And I
absolutely.
think it's a whole car rage thing. It's like people feel as if they can hide behind the screen and then purge what they wanted to do.
Yeah,
And the funny thing is, I do chuckle at the videos. He's a British guy, and he's into his fitness stuff, and he goes after people posting negative comments on other fitness blogs. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but he's quite a big burly guy, and it's like this woman is doing a deadlift, and someone's commented, "Oh my god, I could lift heavy with my shopping bags." Then he goes onto the Instagram and he's like, "Well, does he passes judgment back to the person passing
yeah,
judgment."
yeah, yeah.
It's not a it's not necessarily something that I personally would do, but I do chuckle that it's like, well,
You've got the right to call someone out, though,
who
haven't you?
yeah, it's like who
Yeah.
are we to judge what somebody else has done
The fact is
to the
they're
likes
doing
of them?
something and you're not. I guess that's the thing.
Well, I can only see it as a success in the sense, like I said, of evoking an emotion, and dare I say, I try to see it as, rightly or wrongly, jealousy, and because you have some people saying, "God, I can do it," and you kind of go,
Yeah,
"Well, do
but
it then,"
you can't please
you know.
everybody. You what,
No, and you
and I
can't,
think that's
and
the
as
hard
long
thing.
as
You just have to be
yeah,
do what you do
yeah,
and leave it, and it kind of speaks for
yeah,
itself. Is your
exactly.
preference for kind of one-off pieces, or how do you approach when you've been contacted by a brand and they've said we want 200 dials done? How do you kind of work those out?
Preference would be if I have a concept that could be, I dare say the word mass produced, but produced on
Hmm.
volume, like the Spinnaker was, 250 odd pieces. If I
Yeah,
have a concept that can be, um, created at that volume, then great, no problem at all. I don't have an issue doing that.
yeah,
Um, but it does come down to the actual concept. What I do find, and what I have found myself doing, multiples of something, is I can never. I do one, and I'm really happy with it, and then when I try to go back and do it again, I might improve the
yeah,
finish and the style and the artwork, but I find myself getting bored, dare I
yeah,
say,
yeah. Of course.
of doing the same
If
thing.
you've got that many
Case
dials to
case in
do,
point,
that's
yeah,
that's a hard thing to
yeah.
keep that focus on, as if everyone's
It's
you know, a one-off.
Yeah, I mean, case in point would be like the Bamford Dragon dial that I did for them. My initial concept for that was to produce 24 unique pieces because it was a year of the dragon,
Yeah, yeah,
2024, 24, but individually unique dragons. So every dragon will be different. Um, and they wanted the same dragon produced, which I understand that they want consistency and it's easier for photography and, people, I get that, but I did find myself getting quite,
towards the end, you've got to kind of make them look
yeah,
that different from each other.
well, they all had to look the same, but it was more a case of like, I knew that I had to paint so many this week and I'd be like, oh, it's like,
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
it
yeah,
didn't, it didn't excite me. The first one really excited me. The second
yeah,
one,
yeah. Of
then,
course.
the more you do, the more you're like, oh, and it sounds really kind of condescending or silly or stupid or anything like that. But I suppose from an artist, like,
It's that
if you
repetitive
could,
work you probably don't enjoy as much as the doing a
Yeah,
one-off.
I don't. I think you would speak to any artist who paints a canvas, and he says, "Right, can you paint 20 of those canvases?" They'd be like,
Not,
"I don't really want to,"
no,
But that's why they all go to print, and you can buy prints of the canvas.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, and I have had brands come to me and said, "Can we do, this, that?" And one thing, there's a cost factor, a time factor, but also huge factor is like, I personally am not enthralled by the prospect of painting the same complex image so many times. So I do like the more complicated, intricate one-off styles. That they're really great to do because you do find yourself, you know, going through a process, a journey itself in terms of that you paint something, then you leave it for a few days because you have to let for the colors to dry. Then you come back and you start to improve
Yeah.
naturally
Yeah, of course.
whilst you're developing the artwork. I mean, they did the Van Gogh dial for a good friend, um, and again, that was, I did the foreground and I was happy with that. And then I did the sky and I found that I did the sky much better than the foreground. So I came back to but it's one of those things that you got to be careful to stop, otherwise you start.
Okay, so you've obviously worked on countless watches. When did you feel you've kind of made your mark, or you kind of you're noticed more than you have been before? Was it when you kind of had the lippy, or when was it you kind of realized it actually? Yeah, I'm kind of doing some good stuff here.
Good question, really. I probably still don't
Or do
feel as if
you?
I'm,
Do you
no,
have that
that's,
kind of
yeah,
imposter syndrome, like a lot of
absolutely,
people do?
absolutely. Yeah, no, I still do feel as if, I have a lot of work, a lot to go in a sense.
Yeah,
I don't feel as if I'm there, and I think that's important to make sure that you ground yourself, and things
yeah.
can change very quickly. So yeah, I mean, it's great that I know people and people know of me, and I'm always surprised when people say, "Oh, so and so told me about you." I was like, "Oh, wow, didn't realize
Yeah.
that I'm on their radar." I mean, certainly things like the Lepe and speaking to people, and I've been in touch with other brands and so forth, and you have heads of CEOs of big watch brands saying, "Oh no, we're aware of you," and you're thinking, "Is that a good thing?"
But then I guess
Is
that's
that
all
a
you
good thing
want,
or a
because
bad thing?
at some point maybe what someone might go, oh, do you remember that Chris guy we met? We could do
Yeah,
something with him.
yeah. I mean, I do try and go along to as many watch events as I can. A, because I love watches, and
Yeah.
B, it's a good way to kind of reconnect with old friends, and definitely meet new friends as well. So yeah, it's important just
Do
to
you wear a
keep yourself.
t-shirt saying I'm the dial artist?
No,
Like a
the funny
sandwich
thing
board.
is like the thing is that when I do meet people, and normally I don't introduce myself like, "Hi, I'm Chris Dalla."
No, of course.
I would go around with like other people, and they'd be like, "This is the dialect," and
Yeah,
people
this
go,
is the guy I've been telling you
"Oh."
about. Yeah.
Yeah, and people go, "Oh," and I always kind of go, "Yeah, I know you're disappointed."
Is it,
You know?
yeah, is that a good O
Yeah,
or a bad O?
yeah, it's like you're clearly disappointed. So yeah, it's always
I was expecting so much more.
yeah, it's like you're a lot shorter in real life, or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like I've no idea what they're expecting, or maybe I'm meant to be walking around with paint all over me. I don't know, but yeah, I do kind of. People don't kind of go, "Oh, oh." It's always like a "oh." It's like
How much
yeah.
fun was it working with Leppy on the grenade clock? I mean, obviously that's such a cool looking, very, very different looking piece.
Yeah, no, I mean that came about rapidly. So I met Arno and Chris, who's obviously the CEO and the brand manager at Watches and Wonders. Not last year, 2023 Watches and Wonders. And just kind of I was there with IFL and kind of just walking around looking at the stuff, and I saw what they did, and it kind of stuck in my head. There's so much more that we could be doing with well, I personally thought there's so much more I could be doing with them. And then obviously when my time with IFL kind of came to an end, I thought, well, if you don't ask, you don't get. So
Absolutely.
I sent them a message online, and said, "Hey, I've got this idea. And that conversation rapidly, I mean, must have been maybe October, November. We had initial talks December, and then it was all
And they were
confirmed
ready,
by
had to be ready
January.
for March. Was it, when was the show?
Yeah, so we were all confirmed by January. The first one, I mean, it was rapid. I mean, I was like, oh, I need these things really pronto. So
Did
they
they,
think they
how did they
sent,
send them to you? Did you just get a load of bits and you had to kind of work out which bit goes to the next part? Because obviously,
yeah,
they're obviously in parts, but
yeah.
mating faces, you want them to kind of join. Did you assemble it first and then?
No, so yeah, they came in these beautifully packed, phone boxes. So every single part was individually wrapped within a kind of a lint-free cloth and so forth. So it was like you're like, oh my gosh! I mean, these things are. I mean, I think they're about 10,000 euros base price.
Yeah.
So they came to me that, and they are raw aluminium. So they did some finishing with them. So they blast them with aluminium oxide because their finishing processes are normally either anodization, but after they anodize, they coat them in a ceramic lacquer
Right.
to
Yeah, of
stop
course. Yeah,
to stop any
fingerprints
kind
and
of
marks and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they say it's for oxidization. I mean, aluminium doesn't oxidize, but I think they're just going that extra
They want to
level
protect their
of
surfaces, don't they? Because
finish.
over time, oily fingerprints can do
Hmm.
devastating things to
Yeah.
metal.
Oh no, absolutely, absolutely. And so I mean, I have painted external surfaces before, but this was a completely different level. And I was like, initially
How
like,
many
oh,
components
so
are in each clock?
well, the ones
Well,
that I painted, I think they were,
as in not the clock itself, but the
yeah,
shell and all that kind of the parts you
I
were
think there was about
responsible for.
29 parts per piece that I had
Wow.
to paint. Something like that. It was in a high 20, yeah. So there's four rings. Each ring has got six parts. So that's obviously 24
And were they
parts.
all
Then the base.
pre-assembled?
No, so they all come individual.
So you
They
had
all
to
come in.
like get your Meccano set out and assemble them all
Yeah.
and
Yeah. So I had to kind of they sent me digital diagrams of how things are assembled and where parts
yeah.
go. So I can kind of got an idea as to this is because there's two parts. There's two levels at the same size, and then the other upper two levels are the same size, but they are shaped differently, and the
Yeah, of
shapes are
course.
so subtle.
The
So
bevels
you're
on
looking
it,
at it,
yeah.
yeah, you're looking at it kind of going, okay, so that's so easy to spot. And there has been times where, um, I have mispainted the wrong parts, and so there's a back and forth, things that had to be done. But it was, it was more of an again, a evolution of techniques needed for that. So it's completely different techniques. And then when I painted it, there was a lot of experimentation done in terms of finishing and lacquers to kind of make sure that they passed their test. Because I painted a whole bunch of parts, sent them back to them, and they basically sent an email back saying everything's failed. I'm like, oh no. So you kind of like, oh no, this collaboration's not going to work and so forth. And then they're wonderful, lovely people where they're very amenable. They're like, well, why don't we try this? Why don't we try that? So I was speaking to the
But it's new
technicians,
to
speaking
both
to the
people,
brand
isn't it?
manager.
It's new to them. They don't know how the paints are going to
Exactly.
adhere to the metals, and you've got to
Yeah,
work out what kind of primers you want, and then
exactly. Yeah.
obviously, build your surfaces and colors from there.
Hmm. Yeah, so it was, we found a fix. Obviously, it needed a very strong acid etch primer. Then I was able to put the colors on top, and then they were finished in Cerakote. So they've got a ceramic coated lacquer on the outside, and that
So you
that
just sent them
basically is.
back, and then they
Oh
coated
no,
all
I did it
in.
all. Yeah,
Oh, you
yeah,
did
I
it
had
all
to
in
do it all.
house.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
I did it all. Yeah. Oh, I mean, they have a facility to do that, but it was easier for me to do that here
Was this on your bedroom
because of.
floor?
Oh, yeah, well, luckily I've got a purpose-built studio to do that. So, but yeah, it was like, again, had to buy. I mean, this is the investment side of things.
Yeah, of
This is
course. You've got to buy all the kit, haven't
where
you?
I
Yeah.
had to, buy new extractor fans, new equipment, ceramics. The Cerakote stuff is unbelievably expensive for what it is. So all that kind of gets
Yeah.
factored into things. But again, it's another caveat, I suppose. Another string to the bow.
Obviously, you've worked on countless watches for other people like myself. Are there any watches you yet to get your mitts on, or something you'd think, "Oh, I'd love to do something with that"?
Patek is probably the only watch brand I can't that I haven't done yet.
Need to
And
find someone
yeah,
brave enough to give you their Patek.
well, yeah, I mean, the things when you look at the luxury watch world in terms of people, customizing Pateks, it's actually quite a common luxury watch to customize. I mean, you look at, people
Hmm.
like Blakon and Artisan Genève, they do, there are
Yeah,
people who have that desire and want to do that. I suppose it's making sure that you have someone who's probably as mad as I am to do it. But I've been lucky enough to paint some APs, obviously plenty of Rolex, Omegas. So yeah, most of the Cartiers, most of the kind of the top brands. There's obviously you go into the micro brand luxury world, which I haven't really dabbled in, like MB&F and all these other wee things. But hopefully, only time will tell. There's always discussions being had, and you
I
have
guess
discussions with
with brands
people.
like
It doesn't.
MB&F, someone sent you their horology machine, and you said, "Well, it's got to take it apart to paint
Yeah,
something," and you
yeah.
go,
Well,
"Oh dear, not sure how that's
yeah.
going to go
No.
back together."
No, that's it. There's plenty of things that I've said to people like, unfortunately, I'm not best placed to deal
Yeah,
with
you
the
know your
watchmaking side of
limitations.
things,
Yeah,
and I have,
absolutely.
yeah, and I have worked with some brands, where they have been amenable for me to send them their watch and they have taken the dial off and sent it to me
What's a
and I've then painted it
safer
for the
way?
customer.
There's no
Yeah.
worries that, it's certainly a very expensive piece or something that's very precious to them.
Hmm.
The last thing you want is to be able to, to send it back and it not be as, you know.
Yeah.
So
No,
going back
that's the
to
thing.
when we first met,
Hmm.
was that Watch Pro a couple of months back? And obviously,
Certainly was.
I was familiar with your work. You were working with Apier. We've also done some of the photography for Apier. And ironically, on the way down, I discussed with Mark, my brother, um, oh, Chris is going to be there. He's doing this amazing work. I wonder if I could get him to do one of my watches. And obviously, when you've got a collection of watches, it's kind of working out. Which watch do I
Yeah.
sacrifice? Not sacrifice, but which one, would work.
Hmm.
Um, so obviously, I picked the Tudor Pelagos FXD, and that was kind of based on, I think after a conversation with you, you said to me, I can do anything you want, but it's nicer to have some kind of story.
Yeah. Totally is. Yeah.
Because that kind of resonated with me. Because obviously I could just say, oh, just paint me a dragon or paint me a
Hmm.
helicopter, whatever you want on it. But obviously, it's
Hmm.
the fact that it's personal to me means so much more. So
Hmm.
I guess you kind of sent me away with some homework, which I'm
Yeah.
very, very glad you did because, staring at the watch and looking at it, it kind of, it reminded me of a blueprint. My late father used to be a draftsman. Used to work with blueprints, used to bring them home from work. I remember going into work with him and seeing these great big AO sheets of paper with, all these kind of blueprints on. And when I first started work as a tool and model maker, this is all pre-CAD, so it was all blueprints. So when I saw the dial and had that conversation with you, it all of a sudden it kind of all aligned up. So it was just a matter of then
Hmm.
working out how
Exactly.
um,
Yeah.
we can kind of process it. So obviously, I sent you some ideas and wasn't that long before you came up with for me,
Yeah.
exactly what I wanted.
No, that's good. I mean, I think as you say, like going back to the early conversation we had about, people being so afflicted with what you do to your personal items. But
Yeah,
that's the point of what I try and do is trying to, every story, that's the saying, every watch is a story. But I think the story is to the owner and watches, if maybe it's a gender specific thing, but if you think about watches, it potentially is, apart from if you're married or you have maybe a sovereign ring, is one of the only pieces of jewelry a man may wear on a fairly regular
yeah,
basis.
yeah,
And with that, there is obviously an affinity with that piece that you're wearing. whether it's that it's bought for graduation or it's a desire, or
Yeah.
you find that, even watches that are £10, there's a choice made with that watch
Yeah.
in terms of how it looks and so forth. And I think that's important where you then, if you're going to then take that time to customize it, it has to be purposeful. Um, so yeah, absolutely. It has to have a narrative to it. It has to have a story. It's not my story. And you have many people come to you and say, well, do
No,
whatever
but
you like in a
you
watch. And it's
took
like,
my
well,
thoughts and you
mhm,
actually, you kind of align them all on the dial. And when you
mm,
sent me back that first kind of proof, I was like, that's exactly what I wanted.
oh, that's good. That's
Almost to
good.
the, there were a few tweaks obviously we made,
hmm
changed it around. We had the idea of kind of using the movement underneath it, and you took some of those little movement positions and put them on the dial. And I just think, yeah, it just works so well. And
Yeah.
I checked the figures yesterday, and it's had over 250,000 views
Wow. Wow.
between two
That's
posts. So
incredible.
it's, I mean, we've never had a post go that mad, and it's been amazing, and I can't wait to kind of finish up this article, get it out there, and
Mm,
kind of share it some more. But genuinely, it meant the world uh, for me to get it back and get on my wrist, because now it was just a watch that I owned that
mm.
I liked. That now I feel has been kind of cemented that this is a watch I will keep forever, and I will probably,
Oh, that's lovely to know.
I
Yeah.
couldn't
And I
I couldn't
mean,
sell it because it was done for me for a reason. And now,
yeah.
I'll probably pass it on to my son at some point, and who knows what. But I think, honestly, it's a real thrill to wear it. And
No,
I can't wait to kind of go to places to say, oh, have you seen, this is it in real life.
this is it. Yeah. No, that's beautiful. And I appreciate that. And it's been, I think that's what I love doing is when you do understand someone's story,
Yeah.
you connect with them, and then you find that you're able to, kind of see the watch through, for your eyes.
Someone else's
You
eyes.
kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, well, you're thinking, well, I think this is what they mean. And I think that's the idea of bouncing backwards ideas. And this is where I truly I'm not onerous or one of those people that says, well, this is only what I'm going to do, whether you like it or love it. I don't want to, and I'm not like that. If there's something that you don't like, we'll change it. And
Yeah.
that's where I love, it is a collaboration, really.
Absolutely.
And
Although you
that's what I
now
love
have
doing.
Mark, my twin, once he
Yeah.
saw it, he's like, okay, I need
Yeah.
one now. Need one, don't
Oh,
need one. But yeah, so
you'd like one, yeah.
he's now going to get the black one at some point. When
Brilliant.
he gets that, I'm no doubt there'll be another knock on the door and another
Well,
one to come through to you.
yeah,
But
happy to do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just amazing the power of imagination, and I think
Brilliant.
it's quite special when you see something very, very different. Obviously, anything you buy is made by a brand, and they're all the same, whether they're cars
hmm
or watches, lamps,
hmm
cameras, whatever. But it's when you see something that's been a piece unique, made for
hmm
that person, been
Yeah.
customized, just kind of elevates it to kind of another level.
Yeah. And I think everybody wants to have something. Everybody wants a piece unique. That's why we all
Yeah.
dress the way we dress and have the things we have.
Be
And
very boring
I
if we
think when
all
you start,
wore the same clothes, wouldn't it? And
it would be, and I think I mean, that's why I do love doing what I do, and sometimes do find it strange people's opinions about it. It's like, well, this is why you don't like it, because it's so personal to the owner. It's not going to resonate with you, and I think that's when people who do collect watches and they get to this point in their collection where they have a core collection or a core watch or a gift or something that they want to then make that extra special. I think
yeah,
that's when and it's things like, and it's doing the abnormal, which I like to do, in a
yeah,
sense of, um, like people will come to me and say, I would like my daughter's name on the dial, or
yeah,
my son's birthday or whatever. And like, I
yeah.
kind of go, well, instead of doing that, why don't we, there's apps online where you can actually orientate the night sky to the exact time, location and date of when their child
You
was
put like a
born or their
star plot on the
anniversary.
dial or
And
something like
then,
that.
and then you
Yeah,
can what those stars. So to any normal person, it just looks like a random collection of dots.
Yeah.
But to the wearer, it is hugely significant in terms of what those dots
Well, the fact
mean.
you've
And
not actually
that's
had
what I
to put
love.
a date on it because you've kind of reinterpreted what they wanted and say
Yeah.
this probably will work better.
Yeah, there's more meaning behind it. So,
Yeah.
if it completely flies under the radar, people look at it and kind of go, oh, what's this little dots? Because, well, that's Cancer, that's Taurus, that's this, that's actually the night
Yeah.
sky when my child was born. And people are, oh, it's that kind of extra kind of,
Yeah.
and it looks better on the dark, dare I say, yeah, it looks much better than trying to hand paint somebody's name, so. I try and steer people away from doing certain things
Yeah.
just because I know that it's not going to really. I mean, the idea might look great, but in reality, it's not.
What's new? What's new for you? What's coming up? Have you got any kind of big new ventures that you're able to share, or what's 2025 kind of panning out already for Chris?
2025 is looking busy, which is great. There's obviously discussions with brands. Can't say the names as yet,
No.
but there's more collaborations coming out later this year. Finishing off collaborations, so things like the Bozell watch that we launched last year, which was a huge success. It's completing those dials this year. Same with Apia. Those have been completed as well. Early doors. Then obviously, if anybody's noticed on my Instagram, I've kind of partnered with Case and Time. So a gentleman
There's
called
been a
Tony,
lot of
lovely
those. They
gentleman.
look nice and colourful and
Yeah, no, there's a lot of posts. So sorry if that's been
no,
a
I
dump on
liked it.
my
I think it's
Instagram.
great because again, let's be honest, a lot of cases are blue, black,
Yeah,
and that's kind of maybe green. There's not a lot of
yeah.
choice, but obviously it seems to be someone's gone mad with the colour palette and kind of
Yeah, no, I mean, that resonated with me when I first talked to Donny, and we've been in development for the last year or so for a new case and new design, which has meandered through multiple different manufacturers and tests and prototypes. So we aren't able to share anything yet. We have, gone into production last week with a new series of cases which are coming out hopefully maybe February, March time. So more news on that. We can't discuss just yet, just because if anybody is aware of, the world
last
of
year was
the
someone
internet,
putting them out before you do.
yeah,
Ripping
exactly.
you off. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I mean, trademark and copyright is so fragile
Yeah.
these days that you can put
Yeah.
something up and then somebody will then try to do that or try
Yeah.
and beat you with a digital post, and that makes you look like you're the second person and
Yeah,
so
of
forth. So
course.
lots of
Yeah.
fun things like that coming up, which will really, so there'll be, if you're interested in stuff, please head over to the Case and Time website and sign up to the newsletter. We don't bombard you. The only thing we bombard you with is
Is
actually
this something
discount
you've
codes.
gone in, your partnership with that brand, or is this
Yes.
something you're
So
just doing work for them?
No, I'm partner of the brand as well. So I'm co-owner with the brand, which is great because that means that we can really push new designs and new ideas without limitations. So
Yeah,
that's
you can
really
just
great.
go to town on those as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's still early doors. I mean, we have, we're into licensing as well. So we have received licensing for a particular case which is under development, and we're seeking licenses for other cases as well. So
Great.
it's good to then extend the creativity into the world of accessories, which it is a relatively sterile world, dare I
Yeah.
say, in terms of color palette and
Yeah.
choice. So we're trying to bring some of that fun, creative, dare I say, trying to capitalize on people wanting just something colourful and fun, really. So that's
Why
what
not?
we're trying to
Well,
explore.
there's
Yeah,
a
why
lot
not?
of kind of same old out there from a lot of other brands, so it's kind of fresh to see something kind of new coming through.
Yeah, no, definitely. We're super keen, and I mean, we have initial prototypes which have been passed, and they look great. It's just now a case of then going to production and shoring up any little tweaks and so forth. So
Yeah.
news will come out relatively soon in a couple of months, definitely.
And you mentioned earlier that you obviously don't just do watches and
Hmm.
dial work, you do leather work as well.
Sure. So there was, I mean, suppose it's part and parcel where, initially people wanted some watch cases and ballet trays or, pouches painted. So I've done those, and that's moved on to leather goods like, painted Louis Vuitton for the handbags and trunks and cases. So it's not something that's so hugely, visible on my Instagram. There's certainly a couple, but I find that, believe it or not, most clients who do want that done aren't keen for me to share that online, which is quite interesting, even though it's something that they walk around. I don't know why, maybe, I'm not too sure, but there's,
you're not ventured into the trainer market yet.
Do you know what? There's enough people out there that do a far better
there
job
are,
than me.
There are a lot of people and they do it very well. So
exactly. So, this is where you're thinking, I mean, I don't have an affinity with trainers. I'm not a big trainer person.
No.
So I'm like,
fortunately,
I mean, fortunately, the price of these things these days, but it's, like I say, it's, why tread on, no pun intended, why tread on other people's toes when that's not the industry that you got a love for. So let them crack on with that. And,
absolutely.
They do an amazing job.
So where can people find out more about you? Where's the best place to go and find out more about you?
Sure. So, Instagram is kind of my digital portfolio, dare I say. So, it's The Dial Artist, all one word. Or the website. My website is relatively basic. It's not really something that I spend too much time developing, but again, that's thedialartist.com. And people can contact me through both. So, I do check DMs and try to reply to people as pronto as I can. Sometimes that's too long for some, unfortunately, but, I do my best. I'm a one-man band and I'm trying to spin as many plates as I can. So,
I guess it's kind of hard when you're a one-man band to expand, because what you do is you can't train someone to do your work through your eyes, your hands. That must be quite difficult to realize. I can't really expand to do the same work for, multiple times.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of experienced that with IFL, where I created their watch department and, trained some people, and that, they then wanted to go down their own direction, and I wasn't part of that direction for them. So, I mean, I suppose that's, you can kind of see that where that can go. But again, all that does is just become a factory, and that's not what, I wanted to do.
That's its own thing. I mean, that works for people who want to do that kind of stuff, but you're not going to get
it comes down to quality, quantity aspect for me. You can certainly see a style and a finish to some things at that level, which isn't what I think I want to produce. So, So I mean, and I think for people, I think there's a appreciation for it not being mass produced. So I think that's also a positive thing, that you're not, 20 people strong doing 1,000,001 things.
Yeah. Listen, I don't want to take up too much time of your day today, but I genuinely want to thank you. Honestly, I'm chuffed to bits with the watch you've done for me. And obviously just want to try and get this article out there and let as many people know as possible how, a great job you've done, and, all that's coming from the Dial Artist. So, Chris, thank you so much for your time today.
No, thank you, Neil. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Okay, mate. You look after yourself. And I'll catch up with you soon. For more content, please visit us at our website, www.watchbrothers.co.uk, or our Instagram at Real Watch Brothers to see Mark's watch photography, tutorials, and behind the scenes. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us. Until next time, Watch Fam, we're done. Have a great day.